Welcome to the Dear Rochester Retire Well podcast with David Pulcini from 6 Point Financial Partners. In this podcast, find your path towards a brighter financial future with David as your guide as he helps individuals, educators, and healthcare professionals explore ways they can build wealth while minimizing risk using a multifaceted, comprehensive approach to personal finance. Are you ready to take the first step towards a brighter financial tomorrow? Let's get started.
All right.
Now that we're recording, I want out. I want none of this on the record.
Ladies and gentlemen, there we go. This is going to describe the personality perfectly throughout this episode. And today we are continuing our series on some age-based advice and with the 6 things that we tell our clients. That's right. In their 50s. So if you're in your 50s, this will be a great episode for you.
Possibly.
We have a guest who has really lifted himself into stardom in the financial advisor community, low-level celebrity, we'll call it, Anthony, through his creative and sometimes ridiculous use of social media, and it's pretty awesome. If you've not checked out his content or material yet, please do. I recommend that you do, and we'll get you links for that later. But I wanted to get him on today because the things he talks about and the things he does are basically in near perfect alignment with the things that we believe in our group, in our industry, and we wanted you to hear it from somebody else. So here's a brief introduction taken directly from his famed LinkedIn profile. As a certified financial practitioner, he works in the trenches, on the front lines every day with clients. He is the sole owner of Ruffalo Wealth Management and operates on LPL Financial's independent platform. Anthony specializes in executive equity compensation planning, tax-efficient retirement accumulation planning, tax-efficient retirement distribution planning, managing investment portfolios. And here's my favorite part. He has this posted on his LinkedIn. September 2021 will be the next month we will be accepting new clients. And there's a reason I'm saying this, Anthony. We will be accepting, this is what he wrote, 4 more households in 2021 that meet 2 of the following 3 criteria. Minimum total net worth of $1 million. Criteria number 2, 2020 income of $250,000 or more. Criteria number 3, his firm manages $400,000 or more for you on a fee basis. The reason I say that is that proves that our guest, Anthony Ruffalo, is doing a tremendous job, loving financial planning. He delivers a no-nonsense message, and we love his stuff. So, Anthony, there's our intro. How are you today, man?
Well, there's a lot. There's a lot to unpack there. I don't even know. So, first of all, the beginning of the intro, thank you. Question mark? I don't know. I feel like I gotta. So when you read through like the profile, I specifically crafted it that way because I think there's a lot of people on social that aren't practicing financial advisors and they're just marketers. So I think that that's an important distinction. It's like the social media stuff. I started because for new client acquisition, and I didn't know anything about any of these platforms. I didn't know anything about cameras or any of this stuff 28 months ago, and I just kind of learned from scratch. But I think it's an important distinction to know that first and foremost, I'm a financial advisor, and then when things ramp up and I get pressed for time, social takes a back seat because I am on the front lines. I'm the one doing the financial planning. I'm working with the accountants. I'm doing the portfolio. Like I'm doing all I plan first, manage the money.
The topic of today, and I will try to keep us in line as much as possible because this will keep going, is the 6 things that we tell people in your 50s, you need to do these things. And I think you wanted to split it up a little bit between like almost helping some advisors, which is great. Let me tell you why. Or helping advisors tell their clients what to do. And then also the more boring, we got to do it, but the more boring technical stuff. I have, just so you know, Anthony, probably half of our listeners are actually financial advisors. The other half they're all over the place, but we have a number of just regular people in Rochester that may not know all about the financial planning stuff. And that's who we're speaking to, just so you know.
Got it.
So what's the first thing you would tell someone in their 50s?
So in the 50s is that you got less, you got one foot on a banana peel and the other foot in a grave.
Oh, jeez. They're all going to turn it off right now.
I know. Yeah. But No, seriously, like you really start thinking about your own mortality a little bit more. And my experience with working with older folk, 50s and 60s, man, the things that from a financial planning perspective, I have very, very few people. I've seen very, very, very few people make it. We plan to 100.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the average life expectancy, is like 83, 85-ish.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also have to think about, okay, just because I lived to 83 or 85, what's the quality of my life look like? And if you're doing if you're retiring at 65, you got 15 or 18 years of really
Right.
spending and traveling and doing all those things. So I would say first and foremost, number one, you really start thinking about your health and what that looks like.
Yep. Well, and you know what, we've talked about this before on different episodes, but there are two main stresses that someone can have. And the number one stress would obviously be health. And the second is financial. And by the way, if your health is perfect and then your stress is financial. So if you can take care of both, obviously that's helpful. But so number one, we're talking about health. And what do you have after that?
So let me run it down real quick, because
Yep.
I made a quick list. Here are the things that I dot, and kind of they're similar to what you should be doing in your 40s as well. I mean, there's just common themes,
Right.
but here's what I came up with. And we can have a list of 100 really. But dial in specifically on your retirement income targets. Just get even more crystal about what those numbers are, where those sources of income are going to come from, the taxation involved when you project out and you look at distributions from your pre-tax accounts, your non-qualified accounts, and your Roth accounts, and creating retirement. Do a mock. Hey, if I was retired today based on today's tax rates, and I need $120,000 in annual income, well, what does that actually look like? And exactly what accounts am I going to pull from? Well, I'm going to have Social Security. I'm going to have a pension. Okay, let's say that's 60,000. And then I'm going to have X from my pre-tax. And then I'm going to have X from my non-qualified and X from my Roth account. And then you pull the future to the present, and if I was retired today, this is exactly how we would distribute it out on a tax efficient basis and control your tax brackets. And that exercise should drill home and get you thinking about where you're saving, because you still have a little bit of runway left. If let's say you're 50, 55, you got maybe 10 years of runway left. Well, and you may identify, well, I'm a little light on Roth savings, or I'm super heavy in pre-tax. Let's shift some of my systematic savings from pre-tax accounts to non-qualified accounts, my plain old investment account, to build up that bucket of money. And if you play that game of, if I was retired today, what does it look like? That may help kind of bring the future to the present and identify some gaps.
Totally. So number one, maybe that's number two.
That was number one. No, that was no.
Okay.
Let's call that number one.
We'll call that number one. And it's perfect. So long story short with that, a quick summary would just be meet with an advisor, go through how much money you think you're going to need, where's it going to come from, and then fill in our gaps, which can be easily adjusted by any financial advisor that knows what they're doing.
Well, we'll back up. There's a lot of financial advisors who will just try and sell you a bunch of garbage. And we all know what we mean by a bunch of garbage. And the rule there is, if it feels wrong, it probably is.
Well, I think you already mentioned the rule. Most of them, you can ask for their credit report, their own balance sheet, and let me see how you invest your money.
And their written financial plan.
And their financial plan. There you go. Some of them may have it at this point, but you're not wrong. Right products, right stuff, right mix of things. I don't even like to say the word product anymore, by the way. Doesn't feel right.
I mean, there's a place for things based on a plan and a strategy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe in absolutes. Now, you should be taking advantage of your, from a technical perspective, your catch-up provisions.
Mm-hmm.
If you're over 50, right? You could put 7,000 into the Roth, and then you get the bump on the 403B side, and you get the bump on the 401k side. So it's 19.5, and it goes, it's another 5,500 for this
65,
year,
65,
6,500.
Yep.
Okay. So you've got but I wouldn't automatically just default to maxing those out based on bullet point number 1.
That's right.
So just because you can get another 6,500 into your qualified plan doesn't mean you should get another 6,500, put another 6,500 into your qualified plan. And that's a perfect example of blanket advice. So if you meet the 403B person, and their job is just to sell 403Bs, they're going to tell you, you max that sucker out. And then you even get a 457 and do a paired plan and max that one out too, if your district offers that. Well, and not that is necessarily bad, but it's just blanket advice. I would say go to the plan. And what is the plan based on the bullet point number 1? And you do that little exercise of, if I was retired, what type of flexibility do I have to create income tax diversification in the future?
I love it. And what a lot of people aren't considering is, and you can't project the future. We all know that, as far as especially laws and tax rates, but we've been talking a ton about tax rates rising, obviously. And if tax rates go up, most of the time the people we're meeting with, they have significant pre-tax balances and very little relative after-tax balances. So Roths, non-qualified. When Anthony says non-qualified, that's what he's talking about, after-tax dollars. It may not make sense to put your extra dollars into a pre-tax 403B or deferred comp. It's going to make some sense to put it in after tax and diversify tax-wise. And it also helps out in the future if we think tax brackets are going to go up, which I'm pretty sure we all agree that we think they are going to. You never know, but at least it helps us plan for that, and it diversifies us tax-wise.
I don't know are you a UFC fan?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So you remember who the first person to win the UFC was? It was Hoist Gracie.
Hoist Gracie. Yeah. Yeah.
Hoist Gracie won the UFC. It was like the no holds barred competition.
Yeah.
Okay. Hoist Gracie came in, and there was no weight classes. There were no time limits. It was an octagon. You got in, 2 men enter, 1 man leave. That's it. He fought 4 fights in a night in order to win. That doesn't exist anymore. That ship has sailed. The reason why he won, he was a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and the rest of the world had no idea what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was, because it was a very highly specialized discipline. Nobody knew what it was, and he destroyed people with it. That's why he won. Fast forward, right now, if you took Hoist Gracie and you put Hoist Gracie in the UFC, he would get annihilated. He probably wouldn't even last one. Because now, in order to win the UFC, you have to be a striker. You have to have your cardio conditioning. You have to be a wrestler. You have to be you don't have to be a black belt, but you have to have a ground game. You have to know jiu-jitsu. You have to be able to defend against it. Your nutrition has to be unbelievably dialed in. You're a world-class athlete. I use that example. You cannot, 30 years ago, you could just have a pre-tax investment account and you'd be fine. Fast forward to today, you have to have a well-rounded you have to have a well-rounded savings plan. You have to have a diversified savings plan. You have to have pre-tax. You have to have non-qualified, which is just, a regular investment account that you're going to be subject to long and short-term capital gains. And then you've got to have your Roth money built up in order to win the game of finance. You retire at 65 and you live 25, 30 years, you could see 7 different presidents with 7 different tax law changes throughout your retirement. If you want to defend against that, you can't just have jiu-jitsu. You got to have it all.
I love it.
That's the analogy that I use.
You need to make a pie chart.
The answer is, Dave, we don't know what's going to happen. Right? We don't know what's going to happen in the future. We don't know if we get some harebrained, crazy socialist president, or we get some nutty conservative who's off the rocker that, lowers tax rates to 5% for 4 years. We don't know what's going to happen, but we do know that the best way to be prepared for all of that is to have the flexibility of multiple different accounts.
So, hey man, what are we on? Point number 2, and we're like 20 minutes in. So let's get to number 3.
Number 3.
Okay.
Number three. I in your 50, and this is coming from. I'm 16 years into this business. I've been selling as part of a financial comprehensive plan, life insurance with LTC. I'm a big fan of the hybrid policies. When you get into product, there's a million people that be like, oh, here's why these things are horrible, and here's why they're awesome. I have a whole slew of reasons why I like them. Doesn't always work 100% of the time. Sometimes we have to pivot and use other things based on somebody's individual situation. But in general, in your 50s, you need to start thinking about some type of long-term care coverage, because that is one of the largest risks because health. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest risks that you have in retirement in derailing your savings, and I've seen it, is just not having any coverage, or the risk of having a major long-term care event.
No doubt about it. We did a full series on this that, as of this date, hasn't been released yet. Actually, the date that they're listening to this will be out, but episodes 16, 17, and 18, we did 3 of them because it gets into such detail. And you know how it goes. People get bored. They don't want to listen to this all at once, but it is a huge risk. We walk through every type of account and how it's affected. But the biggest point that Anthony just made is that it can absolutely drain someone's financial situation if they're in I'll call it the wrong spot, which actually means you have something to lose, which is most people in their 50s.
Yeah, it's like, so it's strange. Like when you really get into it. So I've got like a wide spectrum of clients, because it's people whose margins are running thin margins, who don't have the capacity for risk. And that's usually your working middle class, right? And like, if you've only got, $500,000, $1 million put away, that's you. However, if you've got 2, 3, 4 million put away, put back for retirement, you're probably you're fine. Yeah. Like, when I run the numbers and we look at planning and you go, hey, worst case scenario, if one of you gets sick, they can easily afford to pay out of pocket for those long-term care expenses, because when you're taking money out of the portfolio, right, $4 million portfolio generating income, you could do that for a couple of years to pay for a long-term care expense. Now, does it still make sense to leverage insurance dollars and shift some assets on the balance sheet to cover that? That's up to the client to make that decision. I show them, like, here's what you could do. If you think that this is a risk that's worth insuring, let's look at it. If you think that insurance is BS and you don't want to deal with it, then we don't have the conversation.
I like
if
it.
On the other end, on the lower, like in the middle where it's a bigger risk, I'm a little bit more adamant about making that recommendation, because I've seen what happens.
Yeah. And once you see it, going back to our advisor listeners, right? If you haven't lived through this yet and you haven't seen it, once you do, it will completely change how you feel about certain things. So life insurance with long-term care, like you said, slew of reasons, million products, not making blanket recommendations about it, but it typically can make a lot of people.
And from a cost perspective,
yep.
Just take it. There's one particular policy. It's a hybrid. I'm not going to, whatever. I don't want to endorse anybody, but I've been selling it for over a decade, and the premiums have gone, not the clients that bought it, but if you want that same policy that I sold 10 years ago, the premiums are like 40, 50% higher.
Oh yeah.
The cost has gone up.
Mm-hmm.
The insurers are raising the cost to buy these policies, and the math is getting less and less in the favor of the client. And that's just the reality of, how insurance companies, how they work.
Well, it's our aging demographic.
Sometimes they do misprice things. And if you have a contract that has some guarantees in it, man, that's such a good feeling when you beat them.
Oh yeah, we still have a few of those from 17 or 18 years ago that are just we'd never get rid of them. And I remind our clients every time, by the way, we got so lucky that we did this, because we'd never get rid of this. Get rid of it. Here's
the telltale sign. The telltale sign. If you or your client is getting a letter in the mail from the insurance company,
that's right,
they're offering to buy you out, you won.
We can.
Insurance companies don't want to buy people out of contracts because they're losing money.
I love it.
Because they're making money. They want to buy you out because they're losing money.
Yeah. And if you're an advisor at one of those companies or a listener and you're considering doing one of those buyouts, when I was working with one of those companies, it was like endorsed internally, please get your clients to do this. And the reason is because they're losing money, right? I won't get into that. So what point are we on? 4 or 5?
Number 4.
All right, go ahead.
This one kind of goes back to that mock kind of tax planning, is identifying income gaps. And what do I mean by that is sometimes, when we're doing planning with people, hey, I want to retire at 65. Well, we identify this little Goldilocks period between 65 and 72 when RMDs kick in, to where they're in a significantly lower tax bracket, and it makes sense to look at IRA conversions. So I'm a big proponent in that if you're, again, when you look at your balance sheet by tax type, if you're light on tax-free Roth money, you should consider identifying through the planning process, am I going to have some lower income years where I'm in the 12%, 10% effective bracket, where it makes sense to look at doing some conversions, so I have some more control in the future. Roth IRAs don't have RMDs, and that seems like at 55, you're like, whatever. It's an abstract concept, but let me tell you, a lot of the people that when they get to their 70s that have the biggest balances, it's so counterintuitive. I have a hard time getting them to spend money, and they don't want to take it out. So on the Roth side, there are no RMDs. There's no force out in the Roth IRA. There is in the Roth 401k and the Roth 403b. I'm sure we'll see that change in our lifetime.
At some point, right? That's
yeah.
And it's interesting.
Go ahead.
I was just going to add one thing to your conversions. There are little things that can come up too. And I'll give you an example. This was recently happened. We had a client sell a business. And now this is not going to apply to everybody, but it's just a little tip. And there are many examples like this. Sold a business, actually kind of took it as a loss, giant loss on their taxes, gave us tons of room to do a giant conversion into a Roth, and they didn't owe anything. It was perfect. So there are little things in life-changing opportunities, selling a business, other write-offs, things that might pop up where you can take advantage of tax planning that if you're just the average listener right now, you might not even know these things unless you're getting a hold of an advisor to help you take care of it. And that is, Anthony, if you could convert $500,000 into a Roth and you had the cash to pay for it because you sold a business, how beautiful is that for the client? I mean, we couldn't have done anything better for them.
I don't do a lot of work with small businesses, are not my forte. That's not the market that I play in, but there is, the NOL, you get the net operating loss. Mm-hmm. And there are guys that are real good with using the NOL, net operating loss, to offset if you have the right entity, and it's a pass-through entity and it flows through to your personal, you could possibly use that to convert some free money. Again, it's just part of working with an advisor who knows not my space, not my forte. You want to talk RSUs, restricted stock units, and stock options. That's me, baby.
We'll save that one for a different time. We're going to go for 3 hours. So number 5, what do we got?
Rethink your home.
Mm-hmm.
Rethink your home. And that's, again, 55, maybe you're 10 years out. That's planning. Planning is getting ahead of where, at 55, kids are probably finishing up with college. They should probably maybe be done. They're almost 100% off the payroll, out of the house, or getting close to being an empty nester, type of thing. Or you could be an empty, depending on when you started the family. Mid-50s is a life transitional period. If you've got a 3,500 square foot home and you're on the precipice of it's just going to be you and your wife there, or you and your husband there, rethinking the space. And what are we going to do? I mean, there couldn't be a better time to capture the equity in your home. But I believe that that is also part of the overall estate conversation. And it's also part of the long-term care, because as you know, it's all interwoven and they go hand in hand. Now, I'm not suggesting you run out and sell your home and downsize, but you need to be thinking about, and that's a very subjective personal opinion. There's some people, like my dad, he's like, they're going to carry me out of here in a pine box. Like, okay, that's fine. And there are other people that they go kind of in the back of their head. You're like, yeah, I know we don't need 5,000 square feet anymore. There's just the two of us. And really start, what does that look? What are the tax implications? Do you have so much equity in your home that you're over the exemption and you'd be subject to long-term capital gains on the sale? Start modeling some things, looking at it from a tax perspective, and then the opportunity, like, what am I going to do? Where are we going to go? What does that lifestyle look like? Are we going to become snowbirds? Are we going to move to Boca? Are we going to open another practice in Florida? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, well, I've seen it all, right? And you said it, man. The time to sell. If you've created a couple points of urgency here, by the way, the long-term care prices jumping way up quickly is absolutely a thing because of our demographic and our population is just, and insurance companies are not going to want to continue to pay claims. And there's just more and more people taking that and going on claim, we'll call it. The second thing is we are still in the midst of a crazy real estate market all around the country. And we have had clients that have taken advantage of it and they've sold their house. One of them was like, I'll just figure it out. It'd be crazy for me financially not to sell my house right now, take advantage of this. They basically maxed out the gains, $500,000 between the spouses. And that's tax-free money. That is game changing for so many people. So it is absolutely something we should look at. All right. Point number 6, we're going to go past 2 hours again.
Fine.
Yeah. I know.
Used to it.
Go on. I love it.
And the last point is, again, there's all sorts of lists I know that you can come up with, but this one is near and dear to my heart.
All right.
It is, aside from the healthcare risk, it is I believe the number one risk. And I think it is apropos for where we are today in the markets. And that is being cognizant of your sequence of return risk.
What does that mean? Look at
glad you asked, David. Sequence of return risk. And it's a very, very simple concept that can either make or break you. So basically, do you retire into a bear market or you retire into a bull market? What does that mean? When your sequence of returns are irrelevant when you're saving money. They don't matter. Your sequence of returns become relevant when you're distributing your portfolio. And when you do that, when you sit down and you do the math on it, there are lots of studies or just charts that you can get. And really, if you get 3, 4, 5 years of negative returns, you retire into a bear market and you begin drawing down your portfolio, because we tell people, don't just ride out the volatility, don't touch it. Well, if you don't have a choice and you're using it to create income, now you have to touch it. Now it becomes a problem. Also, the study will show, or just a sequence of return kind of flow chart. If you flip it the other way, right? You run them side by side. You get your negative returns in the first couple of years versus you flip it and you get positive returns in your first couple of years. There's lots of different charts that you can get, but basically it's the difference of millions and millions of dollars through a 30-year retirement and/or running out of money. I don't know if I painted that picture correctly.
You totally did. So let's just, use an example, right? Somebody retires in 2007. They have $1 million. They need $60,000 a year. What happened? I think everybody knows that the $1 million turned into 700,000 and they're drawing 60,000 down per year. It's almost impossible to get back to the number that you had. Yep. Now, if you retired 2 years later in 2009 and you had $1 million and you took out 60, but the market returned 40%,
yep,
400,000 in interest, for example, and you took out 60. So just a 2-year difference in retirement in that example.
Yeah. So if you start at, let's say you retire, you have $1 million and you're drawing down 5%, $50,000 a year, year one, right? That's what we plan on, or that's what your plan is. Well, if you retire and market, or your portfolio is down 20%, so you went from $1 million to $750 in year one. You lost 25% of the value of your portfolio in year one. Let's say you get another down leg. you could be at $500,000 by year 3. It's not going to last. And you need to adjust so your income. I mean, the solution, we call it the down market counter move. The only thing that you can do to counter that at that point is you're not taking 5% of $1 million anymore. You got to take 5% of $500,000. You just cut your income from 50 to 25, because that's the only way. That's the only thing that you're going to be able to do in order to give yourself a chance of not running out of money. Because if you continue at that accelerated withdrawal rate, you're going to be toast.
And I mean, everybody knows this, and you've heard stories. If somebody hasn't heard a story like this, I think it's crazy. My so-and-so had to go back to work because the market went down. They had to do this, or they couldn't take any more money, or they ran out of money. So it's a very common thing. So, but before that, so the point is, let's be aware of the sequence of returns risk. But in your 50s, where I thought you were headed with it, maybe you are, is just be aware of how you're invested closer to retirement. Let's not be 100% in Bitcoin. let's make sure we're diversified. We're getting a little more conservative, but also keep in mind, and I hear this a lot, is it doesn't mean you should go all into the fixed account at your employer, because listen, and we've said this, you run plans to age 100. If you retire at 65, there's still 35 years to go. That's a really long time horizon. It doesn't mean we need to go all crazy in money markets and go extremely conservative.
Yeah,
we still need some growth.
So what I tell clients is real simple. Like there's no finish line here. If we do this right, you're going to die with money in the market. Like that's just there's no switch. We're doing this thing in perpetuity. There's no finish line. There's no like, the finish line is like, I get to always give you a paycheck. That's the finish line.
Right.
Because if you think about it, why did the advent of the 401k in 1980 came about? To replace pensions, because we all know why. I mean, you could spin it any way you want. The corporations just wanted to get rid of the pension liabilities off their balance sheets, and they needed to figure out a way for people to also prepare and save for their own retirement. So they lobbied Congress and government, came up with some tax incentives, and then they wanted to shift all of those liabilities off of their balance sheets. That's the real reason why they did it. It wasn't because they were trying to do us any favors.
They wanted it off of their book. So quickly recap the 6 points, or the 6 things that we tell people, and then tell people how they can get a hold of you. And if I'm telling you guys, if you have not followed Anthony on LinkedIn, you have to do it. If you're an advisor, you'll either appreciate or you won't be able to stand it, but it's, but you'll get it. For the regular listener, there's some deep, dark jokes in there about financial planning, but it's beautiful.
I want to give you one on the sequence of return, managed sequence of return risk. So what you'll see is there's 2 ways to solve for that. There's an insurance-based way and there's a non-insurance based way. And I'm not going to tell you which one is, because I use both. Yep. You can solve that with there are certain types of annuities where you can use to solve those sequence of return problems, or help solve those problems, mitigate the risk. It's risk sharing, and there's a cost to that. Anytime you get an insurance company involved, there's always an added cost if you want them to take on some of the risk for you. And then there's also the bucketed planning approach. So if you're a pure advisory guy or a pure advisory gal, you can manage that risk through bucket planning. And real simple, what bucket planning is, well, how I do it is I have your income bucket, your very short-term bucket of money, 1 to 5 years, super conservative fixed income, very low yield investments, low vol. We have income in that for 3 to 5 years, so we're not worried about all of the volatility in the markets over here. You've got your medium term bucket of money that may be like a 60-40, 70-30 type portfolio, and then you've got your long term, your 15 plus year bucket of money, which we even describe it as that's the inheritance bucket of money, and we go 100% equities in that bucket of money. But when you blend it all out, you come up with a very reasonable blended rate of return. It allows the client to sleep at night because I know this bucket of money. I know I got my income coming from here. And then there's also ways you could also do it. There are some annuity products out there depending on, age, fees, what's appropriate. There's some annuity products that work to solve those those sequence of return problems as well. Really don't care which way you do it, but you got to be cognizant of solving for that risk.
I like it. And it's perfect. And we use the bucketing approach very frequently. I actually have a video out on our website about what the buckets mean. And it's one of those little doodle videos to make it so it's not so boring,
cool.
Right?
Yeah. So you want me to recap? So here are the points. Number one, dial in on your specific retirement income targets and what your max spending will be. Project it out. You're 55. What does that look like? Let's assume you're 65 target. What does that look like? Are you okay with that? Are you on target or off target? What do you need to do to get there? Number two, you've got your qualified plans. Look at it if it's appropriate for you after you go through that exercise. If you have the right tax diversification, can you add some more to your qualified plans? Number three, I'd be looking at a life with an LTC policy, or at least addressing through the estate planning process. What does a long-term care event look like? And can I absorb that? Can we absorb a long-term care event either through our assets, what we have, our estate documents? Are they structured properly to get us through that? Do we have them in place? And should we look at possibly passing some of that risk off to insurance carrier? That's number three. Number four, identify income gaps through the Goldilocks period as you transition to retirement while you're in a lower tax bracket. Consider possible conversions to Roth IRA that will give you some future tax control and also allow you to have control of when you spend your money, i.e. no RMDs. Number five was rethink your home. What does that mean for you? How does that play into your overall plan long-term? And then be cognizant of and be thinking about and understand the concept of sequence of return risk.
Beautiful. We could have just done that and it would have nailed it. We're going to get some good quotes out of that one. So,
yeah, well, you can chop it up. You can splice it up.
Hey, man, listen. So how can people get a hold of you, watch your stuff, check out your website?
It's pretty simple.
Find your name, right?
I mean, if only there were a device in everybody's pocket that had access to all of the world's information that's ever been created.
I actually think Siri just said access. That is what ironic timing.
No, I mean, just type in my Ruffalo Wealth Management, Anthony Ruffalo, go to LinkedIn, find me on LinkedIn. That's where I post the kind of fun satirical, I toggle back and forth between serious and, comedy and serious stuff.
You do a good job of it. You
just have fun. And then I have a YouTube channel. The YouTube channel, what I use YouTube is really just, I put videos on YouTube in order to have a link, because when you have a link, it's much more shareable.
Right. Exactly. And that's what we're using it for too.
Yeah.
So
that's it.
Man, I know you're busy. I know you have a lot going on. So I appreciate the time. I know the listeners appreciate it. This should be an entertaining one at least. And there's a lot of good material in it as well. So we appreciate it, sir. Thank you for your time. If anybody needs to get a hold of me, it's dpulcini at 6pointfp.com. Go to our website or check us out on LinkedIn as well. And for now, make it a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Dear Rochester Retire Well podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of 6 Point Financial Partners. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.
Securities offered through American Portfolios Financial Services, Inc., APFS, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through American Portfolios Advisors, Inc., APA, an SEC-registered investment advisor. 6 Point Financial is not affiliated with APFS and APA. This material is for informational purposes only. Neither APFS nor its representatives provide tax, legal, or accounting advice. Please consult your own tax, legal, or accounting professional before making any decisions.